And I think we're live. Good morning here in the United States and good evening. Erev Tov, Tzvi Avni.
Good evening in Israel, right?
Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv.
Tel
It,
Aviv.
it's wonderful to see you and Mrs. Avni Dvora. Lovely seeing you. Thank you so much for joining. Yes, this evening in Tel Aviv. And first of all, how are you? Your country is at war, of course, another war, not started by Israel, where you were attacked. And I know you've been going through air raids in Tel Aviv, other things. How is everybody, first of all?
It is it is the most difficult war we ever had, and it's a very bad time now because we have that big problem. There are the hostages, which we are trying to get out, and it's still 136 people at the ages of 1 year. But a baby of 1 year is there, a hostage. Can you imagine that? Till an old man of 84, 85. So the other hostages. On the other side, we have to get rid of the Hamas. This is a terrible terrorist group. This is not a country. It is not a government. Yes. So
No
it
parliament.
is the big controversy between these two elements. Yes, to get out the hostages, and on the other on the other side to get rid of the Hamas, and it's a big problem.
It is. It's such a tragic situation since the Hamas attacks of October 7th on Israel. And we're just praying for the hostages and everybody to be
And
safe.
people get killed every day. We have this week we had 25, 26 people killed. Yes, soldiers, all young people in their 20s or 30s. They just began life, and now they have to fight in a terrible war. It is a very cruel way of life that we are passing through here now.
It is. No, we are just constantly thinking of you, of all our Israeli friends and friends who are serving in the IDF to defend the nation and everything, and just like hoping for better times and for security as soon as possible. And you know, it's a really unsafe time.
Yes, it is
Absolutely.
it's difficult.
Yes.
There's hardly a family who doesn't have any relation to somebody who was, wounded or killed or hurt by any other way. Yes.
Yes, and in the reserves as well. I know so much mobilization had to happen, and absolutely, and I just so appreciate you, Tzvi, taking time to speak with me today and to
Gladly,
some of your music.
pleasure.
And I'm going to just formally introduce you. I want to just welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Tea with Mimi. This is the live stream show I started in the darkest days of the
Here's
COVID.
my tea with me.
Wonderful. What tea do you have today? I have some tea as well. I have an herbal cinnamon.
Yes, I too have l'chaim.
L'chaim. Yes.
Hi.
We didn't even plan this, but we happen to be speaking on the beautiful Jewish holiday, Hag Sameach of Tu B'Shvat. Yeah, the New Year of the trees.
Today's Tu B'Shvat, right?
Yeah.
So we get to celebrate nature and renewal together, and of course, music. And it's great to have everybody here. If you're tuning in live, or if you will listen later on video on Facebook and YouTube, please say hello to us. Please let us know where you're listening from, what you're drinking, and we have the great benefit of being able to ask questions of distinguished composer Tzvi Avni. So you're welcome to chat with us in the comments, and we will talk with you. I am delighted to welcome you, Tzvi. Tzvi Avni is one of Israel's most celebrated composers. He is winner of numerous awards and prizes, including the Israel Prize, the most prestigious award for culture and sciences and topics in Israel. He's the winner of the Saarland State Art Prize, and the Israel Prime Minister Prize, the ACUM Lifetime Achievement Award, and many others.
There are some more. Leave it. Leave it.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll keep moving. That's okay. We would be here forever if I've shared your whole bio. But he is professor emeritus at the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance, where he also founded the Electronic Music Studio. He was director of the Central Music Library in Tel Aviv for many years, and has also worked as an editor of Music Journal, among other things. He started as a pianist and then studied composition in Tel Aviv with Paul Ben Hayim and Mordecai Seter, graduating from the Tel Aviv Academy of Music at the time, and then went on to have his works performed throughout the world, Europe, the United States, and Israel. You're very prolific. I saw so many works in so many genres: orchestral, concerto, chamber music, solo, vocal, and theatrical, and many more. And you had two stints in the United States, studying at Tanglewood with Aaron Copland and Lucas Foss, and also working at Columbia. We're going to talk more about this because this is very interesting for your musical style. Also, as a visiting
Very crucial time in my life. These two times in America. The first time, especially in the 60s. We'll talk about it later.
Excellent. Yeah, we have some works to show from that time as well. And then also you were visiting professor in the 90s at Northeastern University and Queens College. And I think I just missed you in Boston in those years, because I think while you were in Boston, I moved to Philadelphia from Boston.
Yes. Well, I didn't live in Boston at that time. I lived in New York, but I had the connections. I came to Boston.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, this is fascinating. Well, we have a comment from Richard Himmer. Hi from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Richard. We're so glad you're with us, and we welcome your questions throughout the show. I would love to start with some of your music, Tzvi. And I think first up is going to be an excerpt from your orchestral work, Ship of Hours, or The Ship of Hours. And if you'd like to introduce it a little bit, then I'll share the music and we can talk a little more.
Yes. By the way, I used also to paint when I was younger. I was painting a lot, and later I didn't have time enough to devote to painting and music, and I started a bit neglected painting. But in my musical works, there are many which are related to painting. For instance, I have that piece of my more experimental years, five pantomimes, which is based on paintings by Picasso, Dali, and etc. Excuse me. And the Ship of Ours is based on four paintings by Ardon, our greatest painter, which we had here. And the third movement, which you are going to play, has some special meaning in the piece, and that's the name of the painting also, The Ship of Ours. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope you're feeling better. Yeah. What I think I'm going to do is put on the music a little bit, and then we can talk about it
Okay.
after. So bear with me while I present that. I'll just share it right here.
of this to give you an idea. But eh, here on my tape recorder here, it sounded distorted at the beginning.
Okay, I'm hoping
It,
that it
sound, it sounded well on your equipment.
did a quick
Well,
check.
the beginning is very important, and there are many places here which have some bell sounds which didn't come out on the CD, on the professional CD, which was done in by a German orchestra.
Okay.
The sound of the bells is very clear, and the ship of ours that Ardon told me that he was a child. He was born in Poland, and he lived. His father was a watchmaker,
Yeah.
and at night when he used to go to sleep, he heard all kind of clocks
Mm.
sounding. Yes, and it always aroused his imagination. And
Well,
this painting is a kind of abstract. You see something flowing, but you have the Roman numbers like a wall watch or clock. Yeah, yeah.
yes. Well, I would just want to say, Tzvi, bravo on that extremely evocative piece. We just heard a section of the third movement of Avni's orchestral work, The Ship of Hours, inspired by paintings by the major Israeli painter Mordecai Ardon, which you were just mentioning. And I have the painting for this movement right here for people to see. And you were mentioning the importance of the clock, or that the artist's father was a clockmaker, and that really explains those important chimes in the work. I also should mention that I just shared from the CD recording by the Israel Philharmonic, and
This
conducted.
one here. Okay.
So that
Well,
was
it was played by some other orchestras, of course. But the premiere was actually commissioned from the orchestra of Saarbrücken, which is my birth town in Germany.
yes.
And the premiere was there, but by their orchestra, conducted by Michael Stern.
Oh, interesting. Well, this is just the painting for people to see. I'm gonna stop sharing it at this point. And coming back to you, I mean, that piece, what I've noticed in some of your orchestral works, the orchestration is so colorful and fascinating. And there also seems to be in that work a bit of a dance moment in that section. In the work as a whole, I mean, I know as a younger composer, in our talks, you had mentioned that it was the time when some of your older compatriots and teachers were exploring finding an Israeli voice, or often called the Eastern Mediterranean style. I'm wondering how that influenced you as a composer.
Well, what we call the first generation of Israeli composers are many people who who escaped from Europe in the 30s, and they came like Ben Chaim and Bartosz from Hungary and Boskovic from Romania. And they were the founding generation. They started investing here the styles of the various communities of the Israeli people, and also of Arab music, yes, of this environment. And my generation, which is called the second generation, we were their pupils, but we didn't have to go through this change of style from European to Eastern. We grew up here already as children. I learned in the school already the children's songs in that Mid-Eastern style, which they tried to develop, and some were really influenced by Mid-Eastern elements, and was just kind of the typical things which were for Israeli music. And it was an interesting time of development because we also had a long we were detached from Europe for the wartime for the war years.
Mm.
So we were kind of cooking in our own soup, and everybody. One of the measures of a piece, whether it was good enough, was is it Israeli enough? That what people were asking. Yes, it was a kind of, I would say, Zionistic music. Everyone had to kind of had that feeling that we had to contribute something to the to forming culture of this new country for new old country for Jews. Later, other we will talk about it. Maybe other developments started, of course.
Yes, including with some of your later work, right, with avant-garde and electronic style
Yes,
coming into
it was typical to my generation.
that. Mhm.
Some of the same age, some a bit younger. That after the 50s, in the beginning of the 60s or the late 50s, each of us went abroad because we started hearing new sounds of 12-tone music and sonoristic music and electronic music, and we wanted to see what's going on in the world because we were detached for many years from these developments.
Mhm.
So later, every one of us had to kind of to adjust himself anew to the ways of, let's say, more new thoughts without giving up the important things of before. Copland said to me in Tanglewood, when you get back, this was in 63, when you get back to Israel, you'll have a hard time to adjust yourself to find your own way. And he was right.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how Aaron Copland is very much identified with this American style in music from his works from the 1940s, like Appalachian Spring and Rodeo. But
Yes.
even just when you're talking about this first generation of Jewish composers in the return to Israel, who are European born and kind of finding an an Eastern Mediterranean voice, it's a little bit like when Dvorak came to the United States and was thinking about, sort of Native American and
He,
African
he,
American spirituals.
he
And
absorbed also some elements for them typical to American and to black music. Yeah.
right, and it inspired American-born composers to think about that. Maybe we should create an American sound. So just thinking about those musical parallels is interesting. And then, actually, I would love to ask you about your time in the United States. I think 1962 to 64, when you worked with Aaron Copland and Lucas Foss at Tanglewood. I was curious how your style evolved through what you were exposed to during that time.
It was really a time which is a kind, the center before the war, between the wars, in the 20s and 30s, the center of culture was still Paris.
Mhm.
But after the war, actually, it moved to New York. New York became a kind of world center. Everybody got there. When I was in New York for 2 years, from 62 to 64.
Mhm.
And who didn't get there? Stockhausen and Boulez, and everybody came to present his works. And you had, of course, every 2, 3 weeks there were the concerts of John Cage. And when you came to such a concert, you never knew what you were going to hear or to see because you could expect anything. Sometimes you saw a group of people on stage and you didn't know what they are going to do with the instruments because everyone was looking for new ways, for other approaches very to the very nature of sound. The sound was very important.
Yes, and it just at a time when Leonard Bernstein and other conductors at American orchestras were championing American symphonists.
Yes.
All this music was happening by him, by William Schumann, earlier composers, Walter Piston, Roger Sessions. There was a lot of post-World War II wonderful American music. But by the 60s, by the time you were here, you also worked at Columbia University, right, with Vladimir Ussachevsky on electronic music. So that was quite cutting edge. How did that affect what you brought back to Israel with you?
I had I was lucky enough and very blessed to have a meeting with Varese,
Mhm.
the great Varese, and Mrs. Varese took time to have me as you. I'm having tea with you now. I had tea with them, yes, and I played for him a couple of my works, and he said, it's fine music. You, you can do everything. You are a composer. I said, yes, but I would like to a bit to work with you to learn something additional to what I know of music. He said, you don't need me. You want me to teach you my tricks? You find your own tricks. But I would suggest you should go to Colombia and study electronic music. And he called Yusachevsky, and I got a scholarship at the course in Colombia. I had a whole year there, and it was really a very interesting and a changing element in my life. Yes, the very approach to sound in another way, not blowing into something or scratching something, but having the sound as material that you get. Sound is sound, yes, and you can form it by the very nature of the sound that it has. So it was quite an interesting time. I met also important and interesting people there. So this year at Columbia was very formative in my later development. Then I founded, as you said, the Electronic Music Center in the Israel uh, Music Academy in music and dance for music and dance in Jerusalem. And another great experience was in Tanglewood. Yes, I had, everything was going on there at that time. Again, it was everything so extreme. Xenakis was there. He was the most extreme person of. And I sat with Copland, and Xenakis played one of his pieces, and I said to Copland, "What do you think?" He said, "I don't know. I don't understand." Yes,
Amazing. Well, it's just so incredible that it was Varese who invited you to come to Colombia and and that you knew him and worked with him and all these major figures, especially thinking of Tanglewood in those summers. I guess Irving Fine had just passed away, but the Boston neoclassicists, my ensemble, Dolce Suono Ensemble, in our Rediscoveries Festival of American Chamber Music, played a lot of today lesser performed, but excellent chamber music. And we did do some Fine and Berger and Arthur Berger, Harold Shapiro, Bernstein himself, and also Richard Wernick, who is a later composer. He's
yes.
from the University of Pennsylvania. So I wonder if you came across some of those composers along with Copeland and Voss.
Uh, Wernick, I think maybe I cannot remember now. But we had in the same course we had Walter Carlos,
Mm-hmm.
and this vocalist which you have tape recorder. I composed there in the course while I was taking the course in Colombia. He was the first one to whom I played it, and he liked it very much. And he became more interested in commercial use of electronic music. He did the switched on Bach record. He was one of the first people who did that more popular way. Although at that time it was still a process of splicing and cutting and putting together sounds, not as easy as later in the digital time. Yes,
I
so
Well, let's hear a little bit of your vocalese because it's such a great example of your electronic work. And why don't we just listen to an excerpt and then you can tell us a little bit more about it.
yes, okay.
And a completely different sound world from your orchestral The Ship of Hours with Vocalese by Tzvi Avni, my guest today on Tea with Mimi. Tzvi, what did you do in this work? It was voice and electronics?
Yes, I was at that time with my first wife, with my late wife, Pina, who was a singer, and I wanted to use her voice as a counterpart to the electronic sounds, like the human element versus the mechanical things, things which come from the electrical world, let's say. And I wouldn't say that at that time. I can tell you now that actually it is composed in the sonata form. There is an exposition of the electronic versus the voice of 1 minute. And then is a development of the basic elements. The voice becomes a whole choir, and the sounds sometimes remind also of the great tension which was that at that time in New York. You know, I lived in it was a 68, 63. Kennedy was murdered in that year. So you have also some sounds which may remind that, yes. And then they come a whole development of these two elements, the human voice and the electronic sounds. And then comes a reprise in turned over order of this, again, of the basic elements. So it's an A-B-A form, which the B is a great development, and A has with two elements. So typically it's a sonata, actually. But at that time, if you mention the name sonata, they would throw me out from the studio, you know. Yeah.
That's amazing how you grafted these really avant-garde sounds at the time onto one of the most standard forms in all of music. So,
Right. So, but it's, of course, a very abstract relation to that.
Right. Well, this actually brings me to some of your flute music, because it has been such an honor to know you, first of all, and your music, and to coach this solo flute piece with you, because you've written so many works for winds, which is wonderful. I think always many of our listeners and my friends are flutists, wind players, everything, all instruments really, but we really appreciate it when composers write for the woodwind family. So I know you have a lot of solo and chamber music featuring winds. Let's hear a little bit of Anthropomorphic Landscape #1 for solo flute. And the whole piece is on my YouTube for anyone who wants to go listen to all of it. But let's start it. I'm just going to get the video because I recently have this performance to share. And here it is. And the rest is available on my YouTube channel.
Very beautiful. But this reminds me of something. When I composed it many years ago, and I don't remember every detail. When I listened now to the range of possibilities that I used of the flute, I remember that with Copland, I worked with him. He let me orchestrate a piano piece by Prokofiev. By Prokofiev, yes. One of Prokofiev's piano, a nice piece. He said, this can be orchestrated very well. Do orchestra, and then I orchestrated it for our lessons, for our lessons to meet him and to talk with it. And there was a kind of passage which starts high in the piano piece, something like it. So I divided it like Tchaikovsky would do. First the flute, and takes over the oboe, and then takes the clarinet. And Copland said, "This is now we tend more to show the whole range of one instrument. You should leave it for the flute. All the flute can do all this as one long passage. It's much more now accustomed to do." And I think he was right, because we like to show when we play an instrument to really to use all the ranges, and to make really use of the variety of possibilities of each instrument.
That's an amazing story of Copeland's orchestration assignment and comments to you. And wow, it's so great. And it's interesting because as a flutist, of course, I'm always looking for pieces that explore the range. And in this anthropomorphic landscape, it does that with different techniques. But it's interesting because when I was a student at the Curtis Institute of Music, Ned Rorem was still teaching as a professor of composition, and he would give an assignment to all his students to write solo flute miniatures, thinking that the miniature and the solo flute, you need such economy of style and idea that it would be a good exercise for students. So I ended up going to a lot of composition classes and playing my friends' solo flute work. So it's interesting to hear that there's this kind of tradition from Copeland of encouraging more flute music. No, encouraging more range in terms of the use of the instrument. So
Yes, yes, yes.
it kind of resonates. But I'm actually going to put, well, maybe it's time for tea. Yeah. I'm sorry you're getting over your cough. L'chaim again. You also have the beautiful lamento for solo flute, which I'm also going to put on my YouTube and share. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to just share a little bit more of your fascinating story. I mean, you were born in Saarbrücken, or what is today Saarbrücken, Germany. And then your family came to mandatory Palestine under the British Mandate when you were a little boy. But yeah, it would be wonderful if you can tell a little bit about how you came to Israel and then how you came to composition.
Well, I was born in Saarbrücken in 1927. My parents moved to Saarland. They were both from Poland, actually. They met in Germany. They learned they met. The first meeting between was in Germany by a certain chance, and they fell in love, and they decided to marry. They married still in Strasbourg, but they knew that they didn't have a German citizenship, so that it was easier at that time for Jews to live in Saarbrücken, which was under French rule after the World War One. And the first victory of Hitler was to get it back for Germany in 1935.
Right.
So my first school year was in a French school. I learned French in a French school. Yes, I can still remember my teacher there, Madame Marat. Yes, how she spoke. And in the second year, I was already in a Jewish. we learned it in German, but we learned also a little bit Hebrew, which was founded at that time. This was 1934.
Was
Now,
your first, I'm sorry, was your first language Yiddish? Did your parents speak Yiddish or?
my parents speak German.
Oh,
My
okay.
parents it was me. This was my mother's tongue, German. Yes, but
Mm-hmm.
they knew Yiddish and they knew Polish. Of course, when they didn't want me to understand, they spoke Polish between them.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew they both from homes, Jewish typical homes from Poland, and they knew very well Yiddish. I learned later much Yiddish. I love Yiddish very much, and I have Yiddish books and I have Yiddish jokes books and so on. And but third year I was already in Palestine. We moved here in 35. We had to leave Saarbrücken. When Hitler got it, they got immediately a pass only to leave Germany till October.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved immediately to Israel. And at that time was no Israel, it was Palestine under the English mandate. And we lived in Haifa for many years. And unfortunately, 3 years later, after we came, my father was killed. There was also an Arab riot at that time. They called it the Arab War. It was from 36 to 39 until the World War broke out.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father was killed and by the Arabs. And I grew up with my mother. Just I had to start working at 14 because we didn't have any income. So I worked at the water company in Haifa. I learned technically the water watches. These water meters. They measure the water
Yes.
for houses. And somehow my mother asked me, "What can I buy you?" I had bar mitzvah, so she said, "What can I buy you for? What would you like for a gift?" I said, "I would like a music instrument." I didn't have, what they call Kinderstube, music Kinderstube from home, learn music. So, but
Yes.
I loved music when I heard from somewhere the radio, the sound of violins, which I didn't know what kind of sound this is. It so shocked me. It was so beautiful to me. And my great dream was to play some kind of instrument. So
Mm-hmm.
she bought me a harmonica. It's not an accordion. It's not chromatic. It's like a mouth harmonica, but yes. So, and immediately I started. Of course, I learned to play by ear all the songs I knew, and spontaneously I started to compose, to compose songs, simple things, but I didn't know any notes. I didn't know how to read music and to write music. So I invented a musical scripture of my own. And I was at a youth organization of youth workers, yes, of boys who worked.
Mm-hmm.
There they used to dance. I would to play them with the harmonica. And the leader of that group said to me, "Tzvi, you must learn music. You must learn something real." So at 16, there was a teacher in Haifa, from Poland, a woman from Poland. She had a piano, and used to teach and to let people who didn't have a piano at home to let practice at her home. And so I came every day. She started teaching me. I learned my first notes at 16. And in the meantime, by the way, I bought also a mandolin. I played also by ear, and a flute, also a recorder. But learning really what is a C sharp, I learned at 16. Yes, what is a C? What is the minor, major? So I started learning music with her. And at 18, I got compensation money for my father, so I bought a piano. This was my first piano, and I started to learn with a higher grade teacher. And at that time, I thought I would. My dream was to become a pianist. but I really started very late. In my to start at 16, actually, it's difficult. I played the piano quite well to my need for my needs, yes. And later I appeared also with Trina, my wife. I accompanied her singing when we were in America, but I was not a solo pianist. Never, I had didn't reach that high level. Yes, I played the piano. So, but of course, naturally, I said I want to, if I want to compose, and my urge was to compose. I also, as I told you, I painted a lot, but I said composing is the most important thing in my life. It's either that or to die. That's so the feeling at that time.
Wow.
And so I started learning with more serious teachers and theory and later in the music academy, of course, naturally. In the meantime, I had to go to the army. I was at the military 2.5 years. While I was at the army, I was already married to Nina, and I moved to Tel Aviv. In the army, they agreed to give me a job in the navy in Tel Aviv in Jaffa, so I could go to the music academy while I was a soldier. Yes, and so I somehow it took time, but I was 30 years old when I finished the music academy in composition, theory in composition. And this was the kind of established feeling of myself that I reached my main goal of my life. And at that time already, there were some songs played and recorded of mine, and an instrumental piece for clarinet and piano. And later I wrote also a piece which is now very popular still. It's 1962. It's called Prayer for Strings.
Yes.
You can hear it by many orchestras on the internet. And it was done in 62 in Jerusalem, first time. And
Actually, it's a beautiful performance by the Israel Philharmonic that they recently released, like a newer performance of it. It's a really moving work, and it's just so wonderful to hear you tell your story, especially the unofficial parts that are not in your bio, like how you started composing before you even formally studied music. And of course, I'm always so sad to hear about your father's murder when you were a young boy by Arab gangs. I'm so sorry about that again. Yeah.
yes, it was not easy, but I think this was the right choice.
Yeah.
I needed that. I thought this is really the basic thing that I need for my life.
To do
And
music, of course.
And I had always the partners. My first wife, Tina, was a singer. She helped me a lot. And then with Hannah, she was a writer about music. She played also the piano at 8 years. And Laura is also a good partner. She's a good listener, but she gives also some good advice and also takes part in my musical life very intensely. So this is a kind of no questionable element in my life.
Mhm.
What is I'm a bit sorry about neglecting the painting. Yes, I used to. I should have painted, kept more to painting.
Well, I think some for listeners who are interested, there's some of your paintings on your website. So if people want to visit Tzvi Avni and check it out on the web, they can see some of your work. But I also just want to take a moment. We have some wonderful comments coming in from our listeners today. I want to say hi back to them. Ronnie Gordon, Ima Sheli, my mom and chairwoman of the Dolce Suono Ensemble Board of Directors, has posted a beautiful note. Also, Eliezer Gutman. Oh, Eliezer is a wonderful violinist and concertmaster of Allentown Symphony and other orchestras. I soloed with him last season. Thanks, Eliezer. Nikki Silberstein is here with a beautiful comment about how it all started with your bar mitzvah and your beginning music study. Nikki is an Israeli American educator who founded the Sha'agat Aryeh program, which stepped in 2 days after the October 7th attacks to provide
Uh,
classes online for some of the Israeli families because tens of thousands, even over hundreds of thousands, were having to be displaced from their homes and schools. And so she did this incredible program. I got to teach a little bit for it. It was such a privilege, but I'm so glad she's listening. Jeff Hukowski, great friend and flutist, is here. So enjoying your music and your commentary. And we have other comments coming in. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to ask questions of composer Tzvi Avni while you're here. And we're going to share some more of your music, and we're going to share actually some of your Primo Levi songs, the first works that I heard by you when we met in New York many years ago. And then we had another wonderful meeting in Jerusalem around 10 years ago. But to the Primo Levi songs, I have here some of the recording with Sharon Rostov-Zamir, soprano, and it's the Haifa Symphony with Stanley Sperber. So I thought we could share a little bit of the Cantare movement and then talk about it, unless you want to introduce.
I want just to mention that the premiere was in New York by an orchestra which was conducted by my ex-pupil and good friend Yaki Bergman, who just died a few weeks ago. He did it with an American orchestra and with Sharon Rostov, there was another singer at that time, an American singer. Yes. But this one is a very good performance. I like it.
Yes, Sharon sounds amazing. And I am just going to share it now. It's terrible to stop before the end of that just absolutely gorgeous music. Tzvi, it's so powerful. Your Primo Levi songs.
I cried many times when I composed it.
Mhm.
This figure of Primo Levi is so touching for me always. His writings, his poetry, and he was a great Jew, but a great person in general. Yes, a great man, and somebody who can really be a model of accepting things in a way that will not hurt your life, although you see all the bad things happening.
I see. I mean, obviously, one of the best known writers of the Holocaust, and you've also set works by Paul Celan and dealt with
Right.
Holocaust and other works. It seems like this piece, these songs, the whole cycle is so beautiful and moving. We did it at our Dolce Sono Ensemble's Holocaust related program years ago when we were in touch about it. But whether it was on a commission or not, it must have come from some need inside you to reflect on this. How did that?
It was not a commission. It was just with really. I was in New York at that time, and I met Yaki Bergman, and somehow I told him I am interested in Primo Levi. I'm reading a lot of his writing. So he said, he wrote also poems. I didn't know at that time that Primo Levi wrote also poems. Not many. He has about 85 poems through all his life. That's all. But the great writings are, of course, the novels and the books about the Holocaust and so on. And so I got the English translation of the poems, and I was really very much attracted by the beginning, at the very beginning. And I said, I want to compose music for that. There was no commission. Was just Yaki was very much. He said, if you compose the music, I'll do the premiere. And I decided to do it in the original, in Italian, not in the Hebrew translation. There are Hebrew translations, of course, and not in any translation. There's in German. I said I want to write to the original Italian. So to have the right pronunciation, you can do ridiculous mistakes if you don't. I know some basic Italian, like a musician, so I had a friend, a singer, Zimra or not. She knew good Italian, and I recorded her. She read me the right way of expressing the words, of forming the words, of speaking the words. And I started composing the piece. And it took me about 2 years till I finished it
Oh,
in
it's interesting.
97, I think.
Oh, wow. Because even just listening to the voice in Italian, there's so much Italian opera, and it's kind of a place where singers are used to resonating in their voice, and at the same time, your music for this is perhaps some of the most lush and romantic of your oeuvre that I've heard, because you have so many
Right.
different styles. I was just thinking about whether you also were thinking of a different musical tradition in your mind when you wrote this.
In that last cantare, of course, because he's what is the content of this song. The other songs, there's the one very aggressive when he speaks about the people. He's rounded by people who always come closer and closer and have their guns, and it is very aggressive in the other parts. This is the last song, and he calls it Cantare. This is from 1946,
Mm-hmm.
and he says it. After the Holocaust, after he came back, he sits with his friends and sings. He says these stupid things, songs, which didn't have any meaning actually, and they become such a natural part of our lives. We were not heroes. We didn't want to become anything more important. We just sang them in our simple way, and this gave me the feeling of really kind of sometimes. even close a bit to Puccini, I think, here and there. Yes,
Yes, yes.
the Italian language and the idea of that. But the other songs are quite different. Yes,
Yes, and I should say the whole cycle is called Sequestro un uomo, from the famous Primo Levi writing of that. If this is a man,
yes.
so people can find it and listen to all of it. But thank you for sharing that incredible piece. Actually, we have wonderful musicologist Steve Fisher put a really nice comment. Another person, H. Tonino, is going to listen to more of your music with a special interest in electronics. So I'm glad we showed some of your range, a huge range.
Actually, I hear it here. That is, I speak with you through the computer of Elon, my son,
Yeah.
and the speakers are really not very good. So I heard things which are a bit distorted in the electronic music and also in the fourth beginning of the ship of ours. I hope it's better on the right instruments. Yes.
If it's a little funny over some live streams, what I always do, like my recordings of your pieces are my YouTube, and I'm playing from albums. So I hope everyone will go listen to those albums to hear in the most
Yes.
fidelity. But I'm glad you mentioned that. And also, Eliezer Gutman has asked, do you have any flute quintet or string quartets? And I mean, I shouldn't answer for you because you wrote them, but I have borrowed your Kerev Yom for clarinet and string quartet. I've played that on flute, so that's kind of
Uh-huh.
like a clarinet quintet. And I think you said you didn't mind. I can play that on flute, right? Is
Yes,
that
yes.
okay?
It's
Okay, good.
clarinet, but so you have to transpose. Sometimes it's lower than flute. Yes, so
Yeah,
you have to
it's
transpose
it's
a bit.
it's true. And you have at least two string quartets, right? In fact, we might hear a minute of one of
I
them.
actually have four now already.
Wow.
But well, the string quartet is, such a wonderful instrument to say something which is both communicative, speaking together, and also give individual voices to each player.
What I'm going to do, let's actually hear, because we have it, Summer Strings, your string quartet of 1962. Maybe we'll just hear that very energetic opening music. And then if you have anything to add about that, that would be great. Let me see if I could share it through this site. And
Uh,
wow, and that's just rapid fire, wonderful energy and rhythmic.
by a very young guy, well, not so very young, 30 and something. But the idea was actually I organized a course for young composers. uh, we were all graduates already from the music academy, and we asked Eden Partosh, who was a great musician, a wonderful player. He was also director of the academy, and he was a special viola player, but also a fine composer. He should give us the kind of the right approach to string quartets. Yeah, and we were all of us already musicians, and we wrote music. So it was the main purpose, the string quartet. And I, as the initiator of that course, it was a few weeks before the course. I didn't have a quartet yet to bring. Yeah, I must. So I sat down and wrote four short movements, and each movement was a kind of other kind of challenge for the quartet. And since then, it has been performed by many quartets. I think it's my best string quartet, my first one, but I think it's the best one that I wrote.
Well, it's great. And it must be daunting. I always think about this to write a string quartet, a symphony, a piano concerto, just these genres with such a major tradition before them.
Yes, it is kind of a kind of challenge, of course.
Mhm.
Using, of course, there's always the electronic music and there's other instruments. We use our now much more percussion in music and so on, but it is a kind of challenge to take the old, like cooking a new soup in an old pot. Yes, to find an old way and an old frame, as I did in the vocalist. Yes,
Yes.
to find new sounds, still in things that are is a symphony orchestra, but it's not. It is not again another symphony. It is something which is different from a traditional symphony. That's a kind of good challenge and interesting challenge.
Absolutely. I could see that being really useful as a teacher, as you taught composition, to sort of think about the genres and the forms that way.
Yes, well, I have been teaching for many years and I had many students here. Sometimes I go to a cafe and here comes the waiter and says, "You have been my teacher at the music academy."
That's wonderful. And it's a small country, right? So
Yes, yes.
run into friends. Before I let you go, because I had such a wonderful time revisiting and performing your solo flute works, I'd love to share a moment from your lamento for solo flute, if I
This
could.
was this was written in memory of a good friend in New York.
Mhm.
In New Jersey, they lived. He was quite young. He was 45 or so. Died of cancer. He was a doctor and he also gave us help with my son. When we were in New York, he treated us and we became good friends. Dr. Kornblum,
Yes.
and it was written in his memory. Yes, I think it was once performed by somebody in America, by the initiative of his wife.
Oh, I see. It's very elegiac, like you're saying. You can tell it's kind of a memorial. But I love how the low register of the flute, you give it such a chance to sing in this piece. So we're just going to start. And there's more.
Yes, well, it has, sometimes when I listen to music which I composed, I said to myself, I didn't know that I composed so music which is so Jewish sometimes. Very flavor, yes. So
Yes.
yeah, do this without not to, trying to do that in that way. This is my language, and I feel it comes from inside.
It sounds that way very much. I mean, I just feel every time I hear more of your music and talk with you, I think, oh, there is so much more to explore from both. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing your time and your music with me and everyone listening today. And actually, here we are in Jerusalem when we met, and this is just to
Uh,
prove that we were together in the same room, of course. But
fine,
so nice to
nice. I'm
photo.
you were younger. You still are very young. I was much younger. Okay. Now, but you play wonderfully, and you really have a very rich approach to the various timbres of the flute. Yes, it is. It sounds really when you play a different range. It sounds you give it that quality of a different thing. It's very good.
Thank you so much. That means so
Thank
much coming
you.
from you. It is an honor. It is a pleasure to be with you, Tzvi. I hope to see you
Thank you a lot.
very soon, and I hope you and your family stay safe. Am Israel Chai.
Am Israel Chai, and I hope to see you again here in Israel.
Yes, and I can't wait to hear.
Give my regards to your parents.
Oh, thank you. They send their warmest regards to you, and
All
we'll.
the best.
Yeah, it was great seeing your family too. Okay.
Shalom, להתראות.
Shalom, lehitraot.